finding it through Eventbrite than
Really?
when I'm posting it on the Hopkins page, which is perfectly okay. Because it's all about people that are interested.
Yeah.
So,
Cool.
all right, well, thanks for showing up. Welcome to our presentation today. This is the continuation of an 8-week seminar series about entrepreneurship. The very first week, the videos are posted on my YouTube channel, and I've got a copy of the slides on my SlideShare page also. So this week's session is getting started. The first week had to do with, before you get started, what do you need to know, what are your expectations, you know the saying, know thyself, kind of taking inventory of the resources, the people around you, your own knowledge, and kind of where to start. So I'll just go ahead and begin. So last week we kind of left off with the self-discovery process. So today's session is going to cover when you're actually ready to begin the work, to get started, what's your starting point, and what are some of the first things that you do. And so one of the first decisions you have to make is, are you going to register your company or not? If you go around and tell your friends and family that you're starting a business or you're starting some sort of entrepreneurial venture, on paper you don't really have a business until you've registered with your county, your city, etc., or your state. So there are lots of different businesses that you can start. You can start a sole proprietorship, you can start an LLC, you can start a partnership. There are many different types. I'm not going to go into every single type and all the differentiation, but it's something that you want to think about. So decide, there's some types of businesses where if you haven't incorporated, people just won't take you seriously. So for example, if I was, years ago, I started a sole proprietorship as a personal trainer and coaching soccer. So it was a skill that I already had and I had done it for years. So at first, nobody questioned if I had a sole proprietorship business license or not, but very soon after I had one. However, there's some other types of, I guess more professional businesses where you're going to have an office space, you're going to have staff people, you have legal contracts where you're going to have taxes, you're just going to have to incorporate before you open your books, you start documenting your accounting information. So as far as registering a company, my experience is that there are lots of services online you can use. You can just use Google. There's so many places you can just do it in the course of an hour to register your company. One of the first things you'll want to do is have an operating agreement. If you're working with another person, you have a partnership. It's an operating agreement, to sum it up, is basically some guidelines to operating procedures. There could be some legal information in there. If you get injured, you get hurt, your partner gets injured or hurt, what happens? If you're going to, even before you've issued any form of stock, who gets percentage of ownership of your company, different percentages. If you designated a corporate secretary or you're designating yourself as an officer, it's basically a document that you'll need. And the reason you'll need the document is, in some case, if you go to open a bank account in the company's name, your company's name, they will ask you for a copy of the operating agreement. So in the operating agreement, you'll also need to include, from my experience, an authorization saying that I am authorizing somebody in the company who's designated as an officer is authorizing someone to open a bank account in the company's name. You can't just walk into a bank and open a business account without some sort of authorization that's written in the name of the company. So you'll have to include that in the operating agreement. The other items that you'll want to consider are having a website. It's extremely common these days. If you're not really ready to build a whole website yet, start a blog, start some sort of page that you can put on a business card or just tell people to go look you up online. And I'd recommend having a phone number that is not your personal number. You can maybe to start. I use a service called Grasshopper. Not saying that everybody should use them, but it's a good service where somebody can dial a number and then they can press a couple buttons and then it goes directly to you. So it just gives you a more professional presentation when you're starting. So somebody doesn't just get your voicemail and you're just talking casually. So to get started,
It's called Grasshopper?
Yeah, Grasshopper that's the one that I've used that seems to work well for me, but there are probably a lot of different ones. So to get started, up to this point, the brainstorming process and the idea generation, hey, it's free. Anybody can do it. There is a point though where if you want to have a business license, it does cost something. It's not a lot. These are just some costs that I've observed. It's the minimal amount you need to get started, but you'll want to do your own research on this. If you don't feel like you're really ready to incorporate your business, just wait. Don't do it yet. If you're 50-50, just don't do it yet. When you get closer to knowing for sure, you'll know when the right time is. Maybe you have your first customer lined up, or there's a legal reason or an insurance reason you may need to incorporate. For a corporation, it's a few $100s. I use a service called the Company Corporation. Seems to have worked well for me, but again, I recommend everyone do their own research. To renew your business license on an annual basis, it's about a little over $100, plus you have a registered agent. What the registered agent does is they are your liaison between your company and then the state. So if you get a legal filing against you, or there's some inconsistencies with your tax filings that someone needs to resolve elsewhere, basically you're paying for them to notify you if this happens, if there's some legal issue with your company. If you don't have one, you run the risk of having a legal issue that's filed against your company, and then you don't know it happened, and then you have to suffer the consequences. So having a registered agent is included in the registration for your company. And of course you'll want to pursue official legal advice to get more information about that. For sole proprietorship, when I did it a few years ago, from what I remember, it was under $100, so it's fairly inexpensive. To open a business bank account, you'll need a copy of the operating agreement, which I mentioned. You'll want to have your incorporation documents, which come from the filings. And I think there's a minimum deposit involved as well. If you have a website that you're going to get hosted, you can get it for just a few dollars a month. There are probably some free options too. To get an email service, again, is very inexpensive. Sometimes it looks a little more professional than just having Gmail or Hotmail as your email address, although they're free, which is great. And then the phone line can be around $15 a month, could be less. You just have to pick and choose what works for you. So again, starting point goes back to what we spoke about last session. What is it that you want to do with your idea? The first thing I recommend is if you have it. Most people, when they start business ideas, they're in the very raw form. If you're going to go from the beginning of a germ of an idea to a fully functioning business, chances are that idea is going to go through many phases, and it will be reshaped, it will be transformed into new ideas. So at this point, you really want to start with your initial idea, or maybe you don't have an initial idea and you're looking for ideas. One of the best places to start is YouTube. So one thing I recommend is looking up some of the experts in the field that you're interested in. If you're interested in nonprofits or in helping in underdeveloped countries in a certain part of the world, identify who the experts are in your field, see if they have done YouTube videos, they've been on TED, they've done lectures, or they teach courses and you can watch their courses. Also read books. Pick the thought leaders in your field that you're interested in. Something that I did years ago when I was changing careers is I picked an industry that I wanted to restart my career in, and I read 30 books in the field, probably over a course of a few months. And I just read one after another. By the time that I had read those 30 books, I knew a lot more about the industry that I was interested in breaking into than before. It didn't mean that I had experience, but I could talk the talk. And so when I'd be around more senior people or more experienced people in that particular industry, They didn't look at me as just a junior person who just wanted to break in and didn't know that much. So you could really educate yourself, buy the used books, it's inexpensive, and you'll really enhance your knowledge. Find the sources, who writes about the industry trends that you're interested in. Find the journalists, if they're think tanks or policy research institutes here in DC that represent that industry or that interest to the government. You'll see what their concerns are, what they're looking out into the future. Market knowledge, you may be able to find some like Bloomberg reports or some financial research reports on different industries or different sub-industries. Personal experience is a great place to start. If you've worked in a field for a few years, you're already ahead of the game. So if you spent more time working in a particular field, people will take you more seriously because you can talk the talk and you know what you're talking about, and you know the industry. Don't impose limits on your thought process. There's a phrase that someone said to me that was a quote from a fellow who was running, I think, for a Virginia political office. His name was, the fellow who the quote was from, his name is Don Beyer, and I think he had some automotive dealerships. And his quote was, differentiate, go big, or go home. No, differentiate, go big, or die.
Oh, gosh.
So a little harsher. But that's what I encourage you to do, you know. Why not go big? A lot of companies or new businesses that become these disruptive, innovative companies that everyone, you know, likes to look at as case examples. A lot of times, it just started with a big idea, but with a couple of small steps. So, you know, don't put limits on yourself when you're going through the process. You don't know where you could end up 5 years from now. So, innovation. There are a lot of definitions for innovation. I'm sure if you ask many different business school professors, there's an official definition. Everyone has their own little spin or little take on it, and there are a lot of books, which the whole purpose of the book is to define this. So I found a few definitions which I thought accurately represented it, and this includes the process of translating an idea or invention into a good or service that creates value for which customers will pay. For it to be an innovation, an idea has to be something you can replicate at a cost that makes sense and has to satisfy a need. And deliberate application of information in order to get more out of your resources. It includes the processes and ideas that are generated and converted into products. So these are some of the official definitions. And there are a few categories of ways to do innovation. So one is to do what's called an evolutionary innovation, which is making something that exists better. So if I were to if I were to create a more clear picture on a television screen, or a calculator that could calculate more digits and do it faster, or with fewer touches of a button, that would be basically just the next step. Every year we see computers coming out. If you remember when they had the CD-ROM drives, every 6 months or a year it was 4x speed, and then 8x, and then 16x, and all the way up. But in reality, it's still a CD-ROM drive, which, you know, was just making it better. The revolutionary innovation is where you take the next leap. So now you're going from CD-ROM drives to thumb drives. So you can put hundreds of gigabytes on a thumb drive, whereas you can only have a certain amount on a CD-ROM. And what it does is it usually makes the previous item obsolete, product or service obsolete over time. So the people that are copying, if someone innovates and then someone jumps on the bandwagon and starts a copy, that copier is taking less risk than the first person that said, I have this crazy idea, I'm going to take this little piece of computing hardware and I'm going to cram more memory into that than exists on the whole computer. That was probably a crazy idea that somebody had, but that's the first person that really gets to take advantage of that innovation, and then everyone else sees that it works, and then they jump on board. So trade-offs when you're innovating, as I just spoke about, if you're the first person who's going to go out there and do something different, do something new, there's a trade-off. There's risk, opportunity, cost versus risk versus reward. So some of the degrees, some of the things that I identified from my personal experience, the degree of difficulty you're going to have getting your idea into a product, the amount of money you can make off of it, the amount of personal sacrifice you'll have to make in terms of time, in terms of commitment, in terms of how much you'll have to get to enjoy your social life as you normally would or not, and the amount of time it will take and the amount of stress you'll have to go through. So in a traditional business school textbook, it's not, it's more about, maybe time and money investment and how you divvy up the accounting information, but really this is very personal here. So there isn't really, the interesting thing about entrepreneurship is it takes just as much effort to solve a small problem as it does a big problem. So if you're going to try to solve a problem, pick a big problem. Don't just try to make something that can be rolled out on a small scale when you're going to put all that time and effort. Pick something that's really going to make a difference if you're going to do it. That's my recommendation, because if you go through the process, at the end you're going to have something to show for it. You may as well pick a big fight, because it's going to be just as hard as picking a little fight and something that can really make a difference. And also the payoff for you personally and the value that you can offer to people once you've solved the problem or provided the valuable product or service is much larger than if you just picked a small problem when you finish your journey here. So the thing about innovation is that anybody can do it. You can have somebody who's not educated, has never spent a day in school, try to innovate. You can have somebody who doesn't know how to read or write, innovate. If you are living in the US and you have access to all these education and technology and computers, and you have all these resources and all these people around you, generally I think people innovate with the tools they have around them. So if someone was raised in a third world country and they're living in an area which is affected by all the bad things in the world, say there are parts of the Middle East right now which are going through some turmoil, right? So even somebody there can innovate if they wanted to. It may be difficult, but people can use what's around them to try to create new things and new ways of approaching something that provides a valuable service to people. But the real question is where the rubber meets the road, or I call it the hook or the crook. In other words, by any means necessary. Can you successfully market and sell your innovation? Can you get your first customer? Can you get out of that idea phase and then into the world of commercialization, which I'll be getting to. And so one of the tricky parts of this is that you can have the greatest idea in the world, you can have the most innovative idea in the world that will make people's lives amazing. However, getting it adopted can be a challenge. So one example that I personally like is a common the screwdriver. So we use the Phillips head screwdriver on almost everything. The regular screws that just have the one panel, but we use the Phillips screwdriver on a lot of appliances and household items. However, it turns out that this other screwdriver called the Robertson is actually more efficient. So it's a square, so when you put it in and you turn it, you're not going to have to keep nudging it and then accidentally strip down the top of the screw and then it's stuck. So this is actually a more efficient screw. The reason that it's not used is because it would be really, really expensive for all the manufacturers and all the big stores like Home Depot to start, and all of the appliance makers that these screws go on to change everything. It's the same reason that in the US we don't use the metric system on railways, because it would just be way too expensive to replace everything. And hey, things are okay. We're not really experiencing any problems, and so basically the cost far outweighs the benefits, even though in theory it's a little bit better. So here's our roadmap. I have to give credit to the Harvard Innovation Lab for a few of these ideas. It's something that I personally benefit a lot from it's called the Startup Secrets video series from the Harvard iLab. So a few of these are built into this presentation because I feel they're very valuable and they give a very good framework. So, so this particular slide here is basically a roadmap from your just idea to having a sustainable and repeatable and replicable business model. So this ideation is coming up with your idea and refining it. Confirmation, basically somebody confirms that your idea is valid by paying something for it, or maybe you're raising money for it. Someone has given you funds to build something. You could create your own markers, your milestones, but I'm just kind of giving you an example from my own experience. Creation is when you start building your product. Say it's your first version, whether you're going to make a toy, a cabinet, computer software, a vehicle, anything. This is your very first version. Validation, you're starting to get customers. You have your first batch of customers, not just that somebody invested in you or put money down for your very first one, but now you're starting to get some traction, you're starting to get some users, and you're getting feedback from your users. Repeatability, now you have a method to get more users. You have more of a repeatable business model in place, you have a customer acquisition process, maybe you're now further into your sales and marketing, or you have a way to attract, let's say that you set up a blog or a website where you're trying to attract a certain number of users. Now you've got a method that you can consistently say, in this period of time, I know that I can attract this number of people to sign up. Scalability, now you can start to really enlarge the process. So maybe you take what you've got at repeatability and multiply it by 10 times or 5 times or 20 times. Something that you can scale up. Let's say you have a small group of people functioning in your company, and you can replicate them more and more and more. Profitability, so at this point, if your company is profitable before this point, lucky you. That's great. At this point, you need to figure out how, if you aren't already, to become profitable. So to balance your revenues with your expenses, to pay your employees and to pay your taxes, but also this is where the pricing, there's a process to understand your pricing and your profit margin here. And then predictability is the point where people can say, this is a stable business, it's going to be around for a while, it's not just a flash in the pan, and this is where a bank would be more likely to give you a loan, or someone would say, I want to invest in your company for the long term, you don't need to prove it to me, it's all these milestones have already proven your process. So these were just some steps that I put based on a company that I've started a little over 2 years ago. So again, refine and finalize your ideas, get some case studies, assess the results, start to build a technology platform with your first version, get your first subscriber, get 5 subscribers in different market segments, create a go-to-market strategy, start to penetrate the market, expand to other segments of profitability. And the whole premise behind this is that as you move through these stair steps, you're reducing the risk that you're going to fail, but you're also increasing the potential future value of your company. When I talk about value, I'm not talking about monetary value, because you're not actually going to have monetary compensation, I think. I mean, you could come at any step, but really until about right here, you're not even going to see $1. If you do before, good for you, but you're not going to be able to forecast your revenue until you're much further up here. So money is less important at the beginning. You still have to plan for it, but in other words, you've got to create your own. You have to fill in your own boxes for your own business idea, which starts here. And I would suggest that the more thoroughly you flesh out the ideation phase, and the more comprehensive you can't be here forever. You have to keep moving forward, but the more you work the kinks out here, the stronger your position is when you move to the next step. The stronger you are here, it's like a chain. It's sort of a chain of events. The weak link is what breaks the chain. You can't spend forever, but if you put a strong foundation in, it allows you to move to the next step in a way that what you don't want to do is get somewhere and then it crashes back down because one of these steps was improperly inserted. So I call this the TCP cycle, and what that stands for is theoretical commercialization production. This is my own thinking behind this based on my experience. Basically, the theoretical is where you have ideas. It's where people may tell you either you're a genius or you're an imbecile, and they're not sure which. So your theoretical are ideas and things that exist really only in your head, and maybe you can write them down on paper. You know you're crossing into your commercialization from the theoretical when you spend a little time with someone who's an expert in the field that you're in, and they tell you that they think it has potential. They may say there are pros and cons to it, but then they ask for a real-life case example. And of course, you can't give a real-life case example yet because your business doesn't exist yet or your product doesn't exist. So at that point, you have to move forward into commercialization. Commercialization, you still haven't built anything yet. You have to take your ideas, and now you have to turn the idea into something that you can create, is creatable. You know that you're moving from commercialization to production by either having, by encountering a situation that enables you to perform your service or build your product. That can manifest itself in a lot of different ways. It could be that you have your first customer. It could be that you have a letter of intent from a potential customer that says, when you build it, I want it or I'll pay for it. It could be that you've raised funds from an investor who's again confirming that your idea is worthy and they know how to advise you to the next step. Or it could be that you've been able to perform a case study or an example, if it's a service, in an almost real situation. Like if I was going to perform a service for like a big company, a Fortune 500 company, chances are they're not going to be my first client, but say I perform the service for a small business. That still gets me from commercialization to production, even though my target market are the big guys. But if I performed it as someone said to me, you have to do something for somebody.
Right.
It doesn't matter what, even the smallest common denominator of your product or service, but you have to do something for somebody. So once you get into production, that's when you either build your version 1 of your technology or your product or your widget, whatever it is, and then you are able to receive feedback from the user or the client or the person on the other end that's going to be the consumer of your service. So once you've gone through this, the hardest part of entrepreneurship is going through this whole cycle the first time. The next time you build momentum, but the first time is the hardest. So then what you'll want to do is you'll want to evaluate the production. Did you give them the results that they asked for? How could you improve for your next version of the product or service that you're going to deliver? So then what you do is, then all you do is cycle through repeatedly, and then you have a business. So the other key is how you manage this process, which the term I use is strategic management. Strategic management, I know, has a lot of different meanings and a lot of terms that it can be correlated with, but how I look at it is the strategic management is looking at the TCP cycle from the big picture and seeing the whole territory rather than just getting really caught up in one at any one time. Also, I'll say that some people are good at different phases. If you have a business partner, someone you work with, there might be one technical person, somebody who knows the product. In other words, they have the theoretical and they know how to produce it or deliver it, but they don't know how to commercialize it. They don't know it's harder for them to understand how their brilliant invention or idea translates to the business world. But then there's some really great business people that aren't scientists, or aren't the tinkerer inventors. They're not going to come up with something really out of the box that they made in their in their basement, but they sure know how to bring something to market. So you'll want to also identify which are you good at, so you know when you get to these steps where you stand and what blocks you could face. So here's the cycle as a whole system. So theoretical, commercialization, production, and strategic management, of course, here is in the middle. Expert will validate, a customer will validate, and then your results. You'll want to measure results and maybe benchmark them. No matter what product or service you've made, there are other similar items or services that you should be able to benchmark them against to compare, see how you did, and if you got better results. So a little bit of the theoretical. So again, back to what is it that you want to do? The theoretical is all about the crazy ideas. You know what? This is an exact repeat of the previous slide. So, okay. So yeah, basically this is just the idea process, things that you'll want to do when you start your theoretical. Don't worry about how much you're going to sell your service for, how much it's going to cost. Anything to do with legal issues, don't worry about it. One of the biggest hiccups people have, I think, is worrying about financial aspects of your business and legal issues. And setting up an office. Don't even worry about it yet. You can do this all in your head. So your theoretical phase, T just stands for theoretical. So I call this your idea report. You have to get your idea out of your head, your theoretical out of your head and onto something that somebody else can read. I read something recently that said, there's a quote from Michael Bloomberg actually in his book. He says, if you can't write it, you don't know it. So you have to be able to write it on paper. What I did for my own company is we had an executive summary, start with an executive summary, at most 10 pages. This is also a brainstorming session for you. So it's not going to be the most concise, the most precise document you've ever written, but just get everything out of your head that's on paper. If there are any relevant news articles or stories or press clippings that you're able to find, include those in the report for other people to see and for yourself just to document. Have the final version reviewed by an editor. A good editor, will charge you $20 for an hour of editing, at most. Even better editors may charge more if they do it as a professional service. But you definitely get it edited because you're going to be showing this to other people. As they say, leave everything on the table. When you finish writing this, you should be mentally exhausted. You need to take all of your thought process, organize it as well as you can, and get it into your idea report. Make sure that you've thoroughly researched everything, and you may want to do a few drafts of this before you have your final copy. So I call this the red team. We're still in the theoretical phase, and we'll be here for a few steps. Your red team, this comes from a process in the world of government contracting, where basically you assemble a lot of experts in the room together to pick apart your proposals and to tell you what you're doing wrong, and that's the whole purpose. The purpose of the red team is to find 20, I like 20 because it gives you a lot of different perspectives, and it's hard if all 20 people give it a serious review, it's hard to miss something. You can do more, you can do less, but I like 20. Too many more is too much to manage, really. Find professors, experts, anyone that you happen to know that you think you could give you a good perspective, people that have worked in your career field, people that you trust also. At this point, unless you really feel like your idea is the next big thing and you've gotten some validation, don't worry about an NDA, but again, that's up to you. In my opinion, and I disagreed with this when I was going through the process, but in reality, your idea is still very raw. In that stair-step process, you're still in the ideation phase, you're so far distant from any form of validation that although the idea is your baby that you want to protect, it's still so early in the process, but it's up to everybody how they want to approach it. So find 20 people, and these are people that you may want to keep around after they've reviewed your report. So be strategic about it. Don't just pick 20 random people. If you fast forward a year later, or 2 years later, some of these people could become your first clients. They could become an advisory board member. They could become somebody who you hire for a consulting service if they're an expert in something. So these are people you really want around you that you have a good relationship with. That don't, and the key is they shouldn't ask to be paid for their time. This is a little bit of a red flag. If they ask you to pay for their time, they may still have a lot of valuable insight, but they're not the type of people you want at the very beginning. The type of people you want at the very beginning are people that are willing to invest their time in you. They're not investing their money, but they're investing their time and their energy in you. Those are the inner circle of people you want to create around you as you start your business. So print out your report. To run an official red team, you put it in a red folder, print some name labels, give them a red pen to mark up the report, include a survey. You'll also want to include a feedback form as part of the packet you're going to send them, so they can answer some questions, and then they can mark up your report as they choose to. Send it out in the mail, and send it also or you can just hand it to them if someone you see often, and then give them a return envelope so they can just stick it in the mail. Then when you also ask everyone if they can spend 30 minutes with you, either over the phone or in person, to give you feedback on their comments. And you're going to want to record everything that they say, and you have what they've written as documentation of all their comments. This is going to be hugely, hugely valuable. It's going to help you get from the theoretical to the commercialization. So if you take 20, so that's, if you're able to spend 30 minutes with 20 different people, you may not be able to get 30 minutes with everyone, but in theory, if you do, you're going to get 10 hours of feedback from a total of 10 hours. So that's that would be 600 minutes. That's 10 hours of really, really great feedback. And ask them. They're not there to be nice to you. When you know these people in other circumstances, they might be very friendly and nice to you. But the goal is not here to not to be nice to you. The goal is to give you really honest feedback and constructive criticism, so that you don't go in the wrong direction, or you don't create a service or product that's not useful or valuable to anybody, or can't be commercialized. What you'll want to do is you will want to take every little bit of feedback from those 10 hours of phone conversations or meetings and the red folders, the comments, and then you'll create a slide deck. I call it the idea deck. What that does is it communicates your idea in a more precise way, other than handing someone a 10-page or 6-page report and saying, read this. It's something that you can present. You're probably going to have to go back to the drawing board in a few areas with your idea. You may have to redo most of it, but what it does is it helps you to refine the idea to get it to the point where you can create your idea deck. That's the goal. So remember, these people are evaluating you on your professionalism, how you treat them, how you interact with them, how good of a listener you are, how knowledgeable you are. These people are evaluating you because they know you're building a startup, you're building a business. Nobody knows where it could go, but remember, they're evaluating you for what you could be doing later. So keep that in mind. So here's what I would recommend putting in the idea deck. This is from my own experience, and it seems to have worked for me. Everybody's a little different. Every business, every idea is a bit different. So you can have one slide for each of these. Your title slide, your bottom line up front, also known as a BLUF, B-L-U-F. Just say it's just, if you have an elevator pitch or just a quick sentence about what you do, put it there. Your mission, your vision, your values. It's very important, because before people even decide if they want to work with you or have a business relationship with you, they need to know where you stand on your vision, mission, values. The reason that these are important is when things go wrong, people want to know, or things don't go according to plan, people want to know how you're going to act. People want to know what you stand for. Because up till now, you may have known these 20 people just as friends or a professor or just someone you've known from a previous workplace. But now they're going to have a business relationship with you that may be public. Their name is now on your report. Their name could be on your website that you receive feedback from them. So if they're going to put them, now they're risking. Now other people you've led the way, but now by stepping forward, now other people are risking their professional reputation. So if you don't establish these right up front, people won't feel as comfortable associating with you. You want to include basically your business case. If there are any competitors or any commonly companies that people know right off the bat that they think you're going to compete against, you want to list them and start to figure out how you may be different. Definitely your competitive advantage. But the thing is you can't answer that. You can answer part of that, but you want to get an expert to do an assessment for you. Explain your product or service in a couple of slides, your way versus the old way of doing it, or versus the alternative. What your company can do, problem you're solving, and the solution you're providing. You'll want to talk about your delivery method. Let's say you're opening a pizza shop, for example. You'll want to talk about how many orders you want to take at once, or what your capacity is, what value you're providing, why should somebody buy from you versus all the wonderful other people out there that have businesses that are ambitious as you are to start companies. Summary of everything, what you're going to be doing next, and how to get in touch with you. So again, ask your red team to review your slides. Ask your red team to review your slides and give you more feedback. These people already understood your idea report, your red team folder, so they will be able to give you really, really good feedback on your slides. They don't have to take a lot of time, just ask them to look through it and if they have ideas. Make sure that you make any corrections that your red team points out, and then you're ready to move to the next step. So when you have your final version of your idea deck, again, we're still in ideation at the very beginning here. Now you're ready to build your website. So now you're ready to put things out there for people to find you and to represent yourself. So to me, what a website does is your first step to saying, I have a public-facing portal for people to find me and to understand what I do. It's easy for someone to go on a website and just check you out and see what your business does. This puts you out there for the first time. So commercialization. So now we're in commercialization. Basically, well, this is basically the bridge, because in the red team you may have had some people with a lot of expertise evaluate your idea or your business. Some of them will have positive, some have negative comments, but to me what commercialization is you're not really working on the idea at this point, you're working on taking the idea and now representing it to more people. So you could look at it as marketing or public relations, but I would put it building your website in the world of commercialization. So some recommendations, create some sort of a brochure that could go on your website that's a PDF that someone can just download. You can create a website. WordPress is a great option. That's what I use. It's something you can easily customize yourself, or you can pay a professional to do it for you. Find somebody good so you don't have to redo it a second time. This is only your first version of your website. Don't get too hung up if it doesn't look perfect or it doesn't look like a huge company's website. That's okay. Ask your red team for feedback. A lot of the text, like your mission, vision, values, your team, your value proposition, the problem you're solving, the good thing is you can take and this is also one of the good parts of building your idea deck, is you can take the text from your idea deck and then put it onto your web page. So you save yourself time right here. So just some recommendations for a website. What you do and who it's for in a sentence, why you do it, what your objectives are, mission, vision, values. some sort of a personal statement from you about why you started it or what you hope to accomplish. Have your bio for yourself. If you've written a bio, or you can have a professional write a bio help you to write a bio. What solutions are you providing? This is just an example of the website that I created along with our web developer. We have different tabs: your home, your team, different solutions you provide, your methods, contact. And under home, I've got mission, vision, values, and from the co-founders, just a letter here. So this is just what the home page looks like, example of what the team page looks like. If you click on any of these headshots, you'll get their bios, including my own. Solutions is just some very high-level bullet points. Methodology, this is our consulting service. Again, just some basic bullet points that people can read through in our contact page. As you can see, it's not an overly technical website. On WordPress, I can just go in and change these in 5 minutes. So again, the methods. This was just specific to my business, which is a consulting service. So methods. So here's kind of some guidelines for the brochure. Brochure is important because you can physically give somebody something and they can take away, they can keep it on their desk, they can show somebody else. Websites are necessary, but it's not something you can hold physically in your hand. So this is how we designed ours after a few revisions. You have a three-panel brochure. You have on the outside your personal message, why they should choose you. This is basically the back. So this is the back of it. Why they should choose you, a few reasons, what your solution is, how to get in touch with you. This is your picture, name of your company, and a little catchphrase. And then this is the inside here. This is where you fold it out. Mission, vision, values. What's in it for the customer, how you're different. We put some sort of diagram here. What you do in sort of a graphical format. You don't want the whole thing to be very small text. Why is your way better than the other ways? Compare your business or your idea to the others, and some other interesting graphic you can put there. So this is what ours looks like. Don't worry about the text. But again, here, it's a format which other people agreed that it was easier to understand. We'll probably go through more revisions of this, but it's attractive to the eye, and you can see a lot of visuals. You don't want to overload. There's probably a lot of text here, but this is the very back panel, and it's the founder's vision right there. So now we're going to go back to theoretical. So just when you thought we were getting started to commercialization, now we're back to theoretical. Now you're representing yourself, you're out there. So you have your gold team now. Your gold team are 20 more people. If you thought 20 people was enough, now you've got 20 more people. So these people are more, they're not people that you're as close with, but they're people that are more prominent in their industry or their professions or their level of expertise. These people may not be people that are immediately accessible to you. You're probably going to have to reach out to a lot more than 20 people to recruit these types of people. I would consider somebody that you should put on the gold team is somebody that the only way you're going to get their time is you have to set an appointment with them. A lot of these types of people may have a secretary, a scheduler, a personal assistant. They're people that can really give you a higher level of insight that only a few people have. And so you're going to have to do a little bit more to get their time. The best way is just to be really authentic, contact them through their secretary or their office if they're at a university or they're in a big company. If it's someone you've been introduced to or you know or you've read their book, maybe you read a book about them or they wrote a book themselves. Just be authentic, say here's my website, here's basically what I do, here's a brochure. I was wondering if I could have 30 minutes of your time for a review session. So make sure you only ask for 30 minutes, and if you get an appointment and they want to go for more than 30 minutes, let them go. Let them go on, that's fine. But definitely respect these people's time. They may ask to see the brochure or more information about what you're doing before you meet with them, which is okay too. So these are the types of people. We're in Washington, so we really have access to some amazing people here. You want maybe executive level business professionals. The SCORE, and it's called Service Corps of Retired Executives, is great. It's free. It's a free service. That's a great resource. If you've read a book, contact the author. A lot of authors want people to contact them as a result of reading their book. That's why they wrote it. It could be a scientist. It could be someone who's a large consulting company who did this, consulted in this field for a while. It could be someone who came out of government, who is active in your industry or active in your field, who has a lot of expertise. We have our think tanks, our policy research centers here in DuPont Circle. You have some really, really bright people that every day are following the new trends in their area of expertise. It could be someone that was developed a new technology or is well-known for teaching entrepreneurship or mentoring other people. Someone who's had a high level of leadership. Someone who may know nothing about your business, have nothing to do with it, but someone who's been in a high level leadership position that can give you some advice from an outside perspective. So to your goal team, you want to present your idea deck, your slide deck to the goal team. They're going to have revisions for you, and you want to take their feedback and incorporate it into your new version of your slide deck. So any changes that you make to your slide deck, remember you have to reflect those changes also on your website. Don't forget to do that. So one person who's really good to help you if you're in a competitive industry where you really want to differentiate yourself, one really great person to have on your goal team is someone who is a managing director or a high-up person at a consulting company. And this person, it should be someone that really has some credibility, that's written white papers and may have written a book or two about the subject, but really is a go-to industry recognized leader in the field that you're in. They can really help you define what your competitive advantage is. The other is people that have recently retired out of industry. In the future, they could possibly help you get your first customer at the company they worked at, or know some other really great people in their field. They're the people, someone who is currently at a company that leads an industry, or someone who recently retired out of one. Those are the people you want to ask to help you define what the customer need is. If you try to create what you think the customer needs on your own, you're probably, especially if it's a corporation, you're probably going to be on the wrong track, unless you have worked in that company or that type of industry for a long time and you've seen how business works at the senior levels. Not as a junior analyst or as a mid-level manager, a line manager, but somebody who's been in the room when they make strategic decisions. You need somebody like that to help you to define what exactly your customer wants. Or if you're just running a consumer-based business or a website where people are going to sign up for sports activities, talk to the horse's mouth. Talk to someone who's a sports enthusiast or someone who's really, really into what you're doing. In order to develop a watertight, airtight value proposition, you need to talk to these two people. There's almost no other way around it, depending on who your customers are. But it would be a good idea to do that. Otherwise, you're leaving yourself open to a lot of inconsistencies and criticism later if you haven't done this. So back to commercial. Now we're back to commercialization. And again, this is important. Get one of your goal team members to really flesh out the customer perspective with you, so it's built into your next slide deck. So you have your idea deck. Now it's been through the goal team, and now you're ready to create your value proposition deck. So you've got to get the value proposition you've got to get from one or more members of the goal team. And this is what your value proposition deck should consist of. Your overview, one slide, what your customers need, get it from the goal team member or members, get a sense of the customer vision. What does the customer want to do? What is it that they want that they can't do now, or that's not feasible for them to do now because they're not doing it in-house, or it just doesn't exist? How are you unique? How does this person from the gold team view you as unique? This could be from the person who is at the consulting, in a consulting capacity. What are your operating procedures when you're working with the customer? Is it confidentiality procedures? Is it that you're going to be you're going to be receiving feedback and then building that into your product. You're going to be collaborating with them in the early phases. What are the challenges that your customers face? Very, very specific. You have to know exactly, can't be a gray area. It has to be specific needs, because these are specific reasons why someone would buy your product or service. And then what is your solution? What will you provide to the customer? So now we're through to, we're at the point where, with theoretical commercialization, you've got to jump back and forth a few times before you can get out of commercialization. So if we go back here, we go back. So in order to get the expert validation, you have to go between theoretical and commercialization a few times, because an expert will only evaluating a theoretical idea can't do an assessment of the commercialization potential, and that needs to be included in their validation. So it's not a linear process. So you've got to go here with as soon as you've created your value proposition, you go seek out the expert. Go seek out the expert. You have to have already defined your value proposition, your competitive advantage, and your customer needs from your goal team. And this is somebody that you don't want them to just review pro bono, if possible. You want them to treat this as if they were on the job at their whatever it is they do every day, and take it very seriously. So if you have to pay somebody for two to 4 hours, you could even pay them probably for 2 hours of their time. It may be expensive, maybe over $100 an hour, but for a relatively small amount of money, you've got someone who really is recognized as an expert to give you the pros and cons and critique where you are. It's unlikely they're going to come out and say, this is the best thing I've ever heard. Most likely, they're going to introduce in the evaluation, they're going to introduce themselves and their background. They're going to explain an overview of what you showed them. They'll explain what the pros, the cons, the challenges, and the opportunities are with your business or your idea. And then most likely they're going to say, I want a demonstration or a test or a case study so I can see what this is like in action. Or I want to see the real thing so I can really evaluate this. You're not going to be able to give them that yet, but that's okay. But you need to get to that point. So this evaluation you get, you don't have to give it out to everybody. This is for you, for the next step, for when you need it. So you're going to need this. This will open a lot of doors for you. So again, most likely the expert's going to recommend that you build your prototype or your first iteration of something so they can then see it, feel it, touch it, use it, and then see how other people react to it. All right, so we're still in commercialization. Now your pitch deck. So your pitch deck, you're now taking everything you've done so far and boiling it down to, if you were in a sales presentation, everything that someone needs to know. Let's say you have a 30-minute or 20 or 30-minute opportunity with a potential client, a potential investor, somebody who you want to recruit onto your team. You've got a limited amount of time. They don't know. You have to act as if they don't know anything about you. They may be making a financial or reputational decision to associate with you. These are people that are not already kind of in your corner and on your team. It's not that they're not on purpose, but these are the people you're going to do business with. They're busy, they're doing their own thing, so you need to get to the point really fast. This is your pitch. And so the problem is if you overwhelm them with all this work that you've done, and we're still in the ideation phase, if you overwhelm them with all the work you've done up till now, it's going to fry their circuits. They're going to think that you're just not organized. So what you need to do is you need to boil everything down, including the up until you got the expert assessment, to communicate this fast in a way they can get it. So I recommend about 10 slides. Title, what the big picture is, what the problem is, your way versus the traditional way. Give a couple slides about your solution, what's your advantage, what do they get out of it, the results, who's on your team, mission, vision, values, and what's next. Do they have to pay for something? Is there a second meeting? Is there something else? Is there a negotiation or a legal contract? What comes next? So I also recommend having an explainer video, because on your website you will actually want to post a copy of the pitch deck. The thing about a website is when somebody goes to your website, a lot of people are not interested in looking through a slide deck. Downloading a PDF slide deck and looking through it, people have a short attention span. So now I recommend creating an explainer video. Of course, we're still in commercialization. You're not changing your idea, you're just now representing it to more people. This way you can, when people ask you or you talk to people, you can say, hey, I have this video, watch the video. People are more likely to do that than read your brochure or look through your slide decks or pick through your website. So what I recommend is take your pitch deck, narrate your pitch deck as if you were doing a presentation. You don't have to video record yourself, but just do an audio recording of you, and you can do this on your computer. Write your transcript out ahead of time. Everything you're going to say, read off the transcript. The first time that I did this, I didn't write down the transcript, and I stumbled over my words way too many times in the first 2 slides, and I thought, okay, I have to write this out. And you'll see if you try it. Because if you try to make things up on the fly, it just doesn't work. There's too much material. The ideas are coming from your head, so it's easy for you to go in all kinds of different directions in the middle of a thought. So don't read off the slides. In your transcript that you're going to read, give some extra context and some background as to what's the story behind the competitive advantage, or what's the big picture here. Provide more context. It shouldn't be more than 20 minutes. The one that I did was about 17 minutes. I think that's a bit long. I'd say 10 to 15 minutes. Our idea and what we're doing is really complicated, but the simpler you can make it, the better. The shorter you can make it, the better. I used Camtasia, which is free. You get a trial period. I'm sure there are many others, but that worked for me for the multimedia. Get it up on YouTube. You can put it on your home page. You can put it on your front page, front and center. So someone goes to your website. Oh, you have a website. Oh, what do? Click on, first thing that people do, click on video. And then they can look at the supplemental material also. Then you can post the slides, the slide deck that's for your presentation, and also the transcript of you narrating. So if they want to download that, they want to read your words instead of listen to all 15 minutes of the video, they can download that too. So now your advisory board. So now we go back to your red team and possibly your gold team. I'd say start with your red team. Gold team people are going to be a little bit. You're going to be a little bit more. I guess the best way to say it is that the red team are your inner core. Gold team people are excellent people you want to have around, but you really want to only bring them in special situations where you really need some really high-level advice. The red team people are people that you could just call on the phone or email almost any time of day, and they'll pick up and talk to you or get back to you right away. The gold team people, their time is really in demand, and so the best people to start with for your advisory board are your red team because they're more available for you. You can ask them if they're willing to be on your advisory board for about a year. It's basically a volunteer basis. You want to prepare an advisory board handbook. You can find examples of this online about what it means. Basically, that they're available for 3 advisory board meetings per year. Either it can be a phone conference call or in person, whatever works for them. And then if they're going to be an official advisor for you, not just in the background, but now on paper, and they will go on your website, ask them for 3 meetings over the course of 1 year. You're going to want to pick the appropriate number of people out of your red team or anybody else you talk to along the way, and you pick them for who can help you get to the next step. Not who can help you with sales and marketing once you've gotten a big company already, but who can help you to get to the next step. Make sure you don't ask too much of their time. If you really need advice for them, schedule it ahead of time, email them ahead of time. They're not being paid. So don't ask them to do a lot of really strenuous work. Like, don't say, hey, I really need to come up with a white paper. Can you write one for me? If anything, you would want to give them like a one-page version of your white paper and say, just what do you think of this? What are your overall thoughts? Not, can you edit this or can you get me a new version? You can't ask them to do, I call mental heavy lifting. It's heavy analytical work. Ask them to review things, but make sure that they don't have to do a lot. Otherwise, they're going to start to distance themselves from you without, no one wants to be rude, so they won't explain why, and then you'll have a problem. So then on your website, on your team section, you want to list your advisory board members and their bios, as well as your pitch deck. And that wraps up our session today. So that, right now we are, if I could define where we are at this point, we are now completing the commercial, well, we're really in the middle of the commercialization process here. So we've moved from, we're just ready to get started, we're ready to sit down and start working. We've moved from theoretical to commercialization with our red team. Or we moved from theoretical to red team to putting up our website, our brochure, our printed materials, back to our gold team, back to our expert who's given us the evaluation, and now we're starting to recruit our advisory board members to build more credibility and more contacts and more people for us to use as information resources. So we're still in commercialization, but now we're building a solid foundation. So as we go through our ideation process, which was the very first step in our building blocks, we're creating a very solid stair step before we move to the next step. Of course, by hook or by crook, we're not there yet. If you try getting your customer validation before fully going through the commercialization process, you're just going to get bumped back here anyway. So you may as well do the best job you can before attempting to get your first customer. So any questions or any comments that I can answer?
No questions really. That was really good. Thank you. Sorry, a lot of things that happened.
All right, thank you. This concludes our second session, and we'll see you next week for session number 3. Thank you.